Your father bought his house at 31. He put 10% down. He got a fixed 30-year mortgage at 8.4%. He made $28,400 a year, and the house cost $87,000. He paid it off. He retired at 63 with the house paid and a pension and Social Security and enough. He told you what worked for him. Buy a house as soon as you can. Stay at your company and work your way up. Put money in savings. Do not carry debt. Spend less than you earn. Live below your means. He was not wrong. He was telling you the truth about a world that no longer exists in the same form. And you have been applying instructions written for a 3-to-1 ratio to a life running at 6.8-to-1. The advice did not update when the math changed. You are the one paying the difference. This is not your parents' fault. They gave you what worked. The problem is that what worked was built on inputs that have shifted significantly in the 40 years since the advice was formed. The house ratio changed. The job market changed. The pension disappeared. The healthcare cost expanded. The student debt arrived. None of that was in the original instructions. This is the thing nobody says to their parents clearly. Not because it is unkind, because it is uncomfortable, because it sounds like ingratitude, because it is easier to feel quietly behind than to name the reason accurately. The reason is structural. The advice is not wrong. It is incomplete. And the gap between the advice and your actual situation is costing you real money every year you do not identify it. The first piece of advice that no longer works the same way: buy a house as soon as you can. When your father said this, the median home cost 3.1 times the median income. A young couple with two incomes could save a 10% down payment in 3 to 4 years of moderate discipline. The math was hard, but achievable. The window was real. In 2024, the median home cost 7.4 times the median income. A 10% down payment on a median home in most major markets requires between 5 and 9 years of saving at a high savings rate. The window is not closed, it is longer, and the asset keeps moving while you are saving toward it. Your parents were not wrong to buy early. Early in their market was a different decision than early in your market. In their market, the ratio made it the obvious financial move. In your market, depending on where you live, buying at the wrong time or the wrong price can lock you into an asset that underperforms renting plus investing for a decade. The update: the question is not whether to buy. It is what the math says in your specific market at your specific moment. Rent versus buy is a calculation now, not a cultural given. Your parents did not have to run it because the ratio made it self-evident. You have to run it because the ratio no longer does. The buy a house instruction was right for a world where homes cost 3 times income. That world still exists in some markets and some moments. In others, it does not. You need to know which one you are in. The second piece of advice that no longer works the same way: stay at your company and work your way up. This advice was built on the pension. Your father's company had one. His loyalty was directly compensated. Every year he stayed increased the monthly check he would receive in retirement. Leaving was a financial penalty. Staying was a financial reward. The pension is largely gone. In 1980, 38% of private sector workers had a defined benefit pension. In 2023, that number is under 4%. The compensation structure that made loyalty financially rational no longer exists for most workers. What replaced it is the 401k, a defined contribution plan in which the employee owns the account and takes it with them when they leave. The 401k removed the financial penalty for leaving. It did not remove the cultural instruction to stay. That instruction remained. And it is costing people who follow it an average of 14.8% per job change in salary that they are not collecting. Your father's loyalty was compensated by a pension. Your loyalty is compensated by a slightly warmer performance review and a 3% raise that does not keep pace with your market value. Those are not the same exchange. The update: loyalty to people and to work you believe in is worth something real. Loyalty to a paycheck that is not pricing you correctly is a financial decision disguised as a virtue. Your parents were loyal because the structure rewarded it. You are loyal because the cultural instruction remained after the structure that justified it disappeared. Name that clearly, then decide. The third piece of advice that no longer works the same way: put money in savings. Your parents meant something specific by savings: a savings account at the local bank. Money set aside, safe, available. The discipline of not spending everything you earned. In 1985, the average savings account paid between 5 and 7% interest. Putting money in savings was a legitimate wealth-building strategy. The account grew at a rate that beat inflation. Savings accounts were a financial instrument with real return. In 2024, the average savings account at a major bank pays 0.47%. Inflation in 2023 ran at 3.4%. The real return on a standard savings account is negative 2.9%. Putting money in a savings account is not building wealth. It is losing purchasing power at a controlled rate. This is not the advice your parents intended to give you. They intended to tell you to be disciplined, to not spend everything, to set aside a portion of your income and let it grow. That intention was correct. The container they recommended no longer delivers the result they described. The update: the discipline your parents recommended is right. The container is wrong. The money that is meant to grow needs to be in something that grows. Index funds, real estate, a business, something that produces a return that exceeds inflation over time. Savings accounts are for liquidity, 3 to 6 months of expenses, accessible, safe. Everything above that sitting in a savings account is not savings. It is slow loss. The fourth piece of advice that partially still works: do not carry debt. This one is mostly right. Most debt is a cost. Credit card debt at 22%. APR is a guaranteed 22% loss on every dollar you carry. Consumer debt, cars, electronics, furniture, is expensive and does not produce an asset. Your parents were right about this, but they were applying it to a world before student loans became the primary mechanism for accessing the education required to compete for the jobs that pay enough to live on. In 1980, a year of in-state tuition at a public university cost the equivalent of $3,400 in 2024 dollars. In 2024, it costs $10,940. The debt required to get the credential has changed in scale. The advice to avoid debt did not update to account for that. Some debt is structural now in a way it was not for your parents. The mortgage on a correctly priced home is productive debt. The student loan that enabled the career that produces the income is a different category than the credit card used for the vacation. The update: the instinct to avoid debt is correct. The application needs precision. High-interest consumer debt. Eliminate it the way your parents said. A mortgage on an asset that appreciates, different calculation. Student debt on a credential that delivered a return. Manage it. Do not panic it. The blanket instruction to avoid all debt is too broad for a world where some debt is the required cost of entry. The fifth piece of advice that still fully works: spend less than you earn. This one has not changed. It never will. The gap between what comes in and what goes out is the only space in which financial progress is possible. Your parents were right. Every generation before them was right. This is not advice. It is arithmetic. The problem is that the gap is harder to create now than it was for your parents, not because of discipline, because the mandatory costs have expanded significantly as a percentage of income: healthcare, housing, childcare, student loan repayment. These costs did not exist at the same proportion of income in 1985. Spending less than you earn is still the rule. But the definition of less is not fully in your control the way it was in your parents' generation. Some of the spending is structural. Knowing which costs are genuinely optional and which are not is the work. Your parents thought it was all optional. A significant portion of your fixed costs are not. The shift: your parents gave you the map they had. The map was accurate for the territory they traveled. The territory has changed. The map has not. You are not ungrateful for carrying it. You are not disloyal for updating it. You are not criticizing them by recognizing that the conditions changed. You are doing what they would do if they were starting now, running the numbers on the actual inputs, asking what the math says rather than what the instruction says, making the adjustments that the new ratio requires. That is not rejecting their advice. That is applying their approach. They were pragmatic. They did what the math supported. They bought the house because the ratio made it the right move. They stayed at the company because the pension rewarded it. They put money in savings because savings paid 5 to 7%. If they were 28 right now, they would not do the same things. They would do the same kind of things. They would find the containers that work in this market. They would run the current ratio. They would adjust. That is what you owe them, not imitation, adaptation. Here is the updated map for the current territory. The house. Run the rent versus buy calculation for your specific market and your specific timeline. If the ratio supports buying, buy. If it does not, investing the difference between what you would pay in mortgage and what you pay in rent produces a comparable outcome in many markets. The goal your parents had, own an asset, build equity, is right. The instrument depends on the math. The company, stay when staying is correctly priced. Leave when the market offers significantly more. The test is not whether you like the job. The test is whether the compensation reflects your market value. Check every 2 to 3 years. Not because loyalty is wrong, but because the structure that rewarded it no longer exists, to make it financially rational to not check. The savings. Get the employer match first. Every dollar of match is a guaranteed 100% return. Max the tax-advantaged accounts. 401k first, then Roth IRA. Inside those accounts, index funds at low cost. What remains after tax-advantaged accounts are maxed. Put in a taxable brokerage. The discipline your parents taught is right. The containers have updated. The debt. Eliminate high-interest consumer debt immediately. Manage mortgage debt the way a rational investor manages any leveraged asset. Manage student debt based on the income it produced. Distinguish between the categories. The blanket rule is a shortcut. The underlying principle is correct. The margin, spend less than you earn. Build the gap. The gap is where everything that follows is possible. This instruction has not changed and will not change. Your parents were completely right about this one. Your parents were not wrong. They were describing a world that was real when they built their lives in it. The world changed. The advice did not update. The gap between the two is not their fault, and it is not your fault. It is a timing problem. The inputs shifted faster than the instructions. What you owe them is not agreement, not deference, not the performance of following advice that no longer fits the math. What you owe them is the same thing they gave you, the honest attempt to read the actual conditions and act accordingly. They did that. The conditions they faced produced their advice. Now you face different conditions. Read them honestly, act accordingly. That is the same advice. Updated.